guys, how's it going? Hope you're all doing well. I'm recording in a closet. Happy MerMay and happy Indie Animation Day! For those of you who might not know what those things are, MerMay is a challenge during the month of May to draw mermaids every day, or at least as many as you can. And Indie Animation Day is a big social media event that happens once every few months where indie animators can share and promote their projects and show some support to other fellow creators. I unfortunately haven't had the time to fully participate in MerMay as much as I want, but I am making a project that involves a mermaid, which gives me the ultimate excuse to make as much art of that character as I feel like throughout the year. I mentioned a few times here on YouTube that I'm currently developing a short film that I originally made when I was in college, and I've been remaking it now that I'm out of school and I actually have the time and energy to commit to it. The illustrations that I'm drawing in this video actually feature the two main characters. The old version of the film was basically a storyboard to begin with. Right now all I have to do is sculpt it and add the necessary details. I can't share anything fully animated at the moment, but I'm truly excited to be working on this story right now, and I wanted to share a bunch of information with you all about it. From the main plot, to the characters and their designs, how I almost gave up on animation entirely after my first time making it, and how I found my old love of animating and art as a whole again through getting to make it in the present day. So, first order of business, what is my short film and what's it about? Dover and Calypso is an LGBTQ love story about the titular characters, a sailor and a mermaid respectively. The film starts off with Dover, an anxious but adventurous sailor who's just starting out on a pirate crew as their cabin boy, for lack of a better word. This pirate crew does not treat them well, and they're in desperate need of money, so they more or less have to bear it. Dover falls into the ocean and nearly drowns early on while loading a bunch of stuff onto the ship, but is quickly saved by a mermaid named Calypso, a curious goofball who is immediately fascinated by Dover and their humanity. Whoa, it's thundering out there. Do you guys hear that? Hell yeah, I love storms. The two of them have a brief but intimate interaction. Dover meets this charming and funny girl who wants for nothing more than to save them, and Calypso interacts with a human for the first time, and they're really shy but also really sweet, immediately giving her a good impression of people like them. Unfortunately, Calypso is scared off by the captain, and they don't meet each other again until a few years later, and then it's Dover's turn to save Calypso. That's all I'll say about the plot for now because I don't want to give too much away, but I do want to talk more about the two main characters because I love them very much. First off is the star of the show, Dover. Dover is pretty anxious and soft-spoken. They generally prefer to keep to themselves. Their fellow crew members take advantage of their passive nature pretty often, and they're generally used as a punching bag. And here's the thing, I hate the punching bag character trope. I always have, and I want that to be reflected with Dover in some way. They definitely would have left the crew long ago if it weren't for a few things keeping them on board. I mentioned before that a big reason they joined the crew was for the pay they get from finding treasure. Another big reason is, despite the fact that Dover might appear pretty meek, they have a huge love of adventure. Dover loves the fact that they get to accompany the crew on treasure hunts and explore a bunch of new places, charting stars and maps as they all sail the seven seas. And I think a third part of why they stuck around with that crew for so long is because they never truly forgot about Calypso after meeting her. I think a part of Dover hopes that one day, if they keep sailing across the ocean and exploring new territory, they'll come across the mermaid they met years ago and they'll get to speak to her and thank her properly for saving their life. My initial thought process when I first designed Dover was that I wanted them to look as androgynous as possible. Not because I think that's how every non-binary person is supposed to look, but it was more for a very silly reason. I specifically wanted people to look at them and be like, huh? Wait, what's their gender? Are they a boy or a girl? Psych, they're neither. But Dover is trans-masc if any of you were curious about that. In fact, I've been having some fun drawing them with top scars lately. Their scars most likely won't make an appearance in the actual film, but trust and believe me when I say they're there, and I have been indulging. Over the past few years, there's definitely been a lot more positive representation of non-binary folks in media, especially in animation, but a good chunk of those characters are side characters. Even some of my favorite non-binary characters don't have that much screen time, and they aren't given a whole lot of development. And while I do feel like that's been improving, back in 2021 when I was just starting to develop the film, I just didn't get to see a lot of characters like that being the center of the story. That's a big reason I explicitly wanted one of the main protagonists to be non-binary. That way I could give them the spotlight, they could experience their own character development, and they could get a love interest. Generally, all my main characters are queer in some aspect because I want to make sure as many people as possible feel seen when they see my stuff. Now on to Calypso, the deuteragonist of the story. That's a word I just recently learned how to pronounce for this video. Calypso is a mermaid who rescues Dover from drowning at the very beginning of the short. She's very curious and a little naive, especially in the beginning. She's very interested in humans, but before she meets Dover, she's a little more cautious of them. She's very fascinated by trinkets that fall into the water from ships or docks, or the things that wash up on shore from different places, but she's also heard stories of humans hunting creatures like her. I think humans are kind of this, mysterious alien/predator type creatures to her. They're dangerous, but only if you get too close, and you have to avoid them at all costs because you don't know what they're gonna do if they see you. But then one day she sees this scrawny little human with something tied around these weird things at the bottom half of their body that kinda look like tails, but they don't have any fins. They're trying to swim up to the surface, and they clearly need help, and Calypso doesn't have it in her to just leave them there. Her good nature wins in the end, and she saves them, and when they wake up and see her, they mysteriously don't hurt her. If anything, they're a little flustered to see her. And it's a little funny how flustered they are. They're nothing like the big bad monsters she's always heard about, and they're actually really sweet. This one's even kinda cute. Unfortunately, an actual big scary human walks up and she has to hightail it out of there before he sees her. But the human Calypso saved that day was always in the back of her mind, and she often wonders what became of them. Because of her interaction with that human, she becomes a little bolder and adopts a more playful attitude with humans. She likes observing them from afar nowadays to see if they drop anything cool. Every so often when she sees the occasional passing ship, she'll sometimes even cause a little mischief and play a prank or two on the crew of those ships. Another huge reason I wanted to make this film is because of how personal it became to me over the past couple years. I think, along with wanting to make a queer love story, this film is turning into a way for me to channel everything I love about my creative process. I'm really enjoying working on it right now, but it wasn't always the case. Like I mentioned a few times already, I originally made this film as a big final project for my senior year of college. When it was first announced that we'd be making something for a culminating art exhibition at the end of our final semester, I figured a good way to motivate myself would be to create a couple of characters and make an animated film out of them. I went to a state school rather than a proper art school, so we didn't have as much guidance on how to make some of our projects, especially if it related to digital art and animation. I essentially had to teach myself how to use Adobe Animate because the very, very small number of professors that were left in the digital media department by the time I was graduating just didn't bother to learn Animate once it switched over from Flash. And because I was making the whole thing by myself, I couldn't make it a finished animation in time for the opening of the thesis exhibition like I originally wanted. The final project was essentially an animatic, kind of like the stuff I've been making for YouTube in recent years, but a lot messier if I remember right. I guess it kind of worked out in that regard, considering I was using a brand new software and didn't really know how to fully animate something with it just yet, so I don't think anything I would have made with it would have been that impressive anyway. I was able to finish the animatic in time by the skin of my teeth, but during the last bit of the project, I had to stay awake for 2 or 3 days straight, just doing nothing but working on that animatic, just to have a chance of submitting it in time for the exhibition to start. In the end, I was just happy that I finished it, but the final project was extremely rushed and I had to leave parts of it unfinished. I was exhausted and I hated how it looked, and I hardly wanted to look at it. The way that project turned out really impacted how I viewed my art and even my self-esteem. By the time I graduated from college in May of 2022, I was going through the worst and longest burnout of my life. I hated everything I made, and I basically had no energy to work on anything. Not my stories, not my characters, hardly even the very few freelance jobs I was able to get. I think I had the fact that I was still planning on developing the short in a couple of my social bios, but that film became a sort of deeply personal wound for me for a long time. I couldn't make a perfectly polished, high-quality, fully animated short film all by myself in a specific period of time, and because of that, I thought I was completely worthless and nothing I made was even worth looking at. All in all, art as a whole just wasn't fun for me anymore for a while, and I almost gave up on it altogether because I was sure I wasn't good enough. Despite everything, though, I didn't want to give up. I don't think I could really find a reason to keep going back then, but I didn't want to stop making things. At the same time, I could barely make myself sit down at my computer and draw in the way that I'd been doing throughout my time in school. So I think I figured the best thing I could do was to just try something else for a bit. A lot of the art I'd been making at that point was pretty much exclusively finished illustrations with as much polish as I could put into them with the skills that I had back then. I was hardly able to draw just for the sake of drawing for a while, and if a drawing came out messy or had any sort of imperfections, I automatically hated it. Honestly, I think if it weren't for other artists I like embracing their messy drawings and mistakes, I probably would have just called it quits there. I saw how often some people started sharing some of their studies and doodles, not caring that some of the drawings were incomplete or imperfect. I'd only ever seen people sharing the best of their best work, and I thought I had to do the same, but that didn't have to be the case. I didn't even have to share all my art if I didn't want to. So I just started scribbling. The first sketchbook I got a few months after graduating was essentially a way for me to rediscover why I liked art to begin with. I didn't draw every day anymore, but I drew whenever I could or whenever I had the energy to. I'd scale back what I was doing and just start working more on my fundamentals, just drawing shapes or people or things that I saw in my everyday life. I'd draw my characters and poses that I found on Pinterest. I'd scribble on sticky notes during breaks at work and glue them into my sketchbook. I started experimenting with horror art a lot more by making fan art of some of the games I was playing, mostly Cooking Companions. And I'd realize how therapeutic that was. If I didn't feel like drawing, I'd just cover a page with stickers or cool business cards or photos from magazines. I'd explore redesigns for some of my characters and test out a bunch of different features for them. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back on it, that sketchbook was a pure experiment from start to finish. And I was actually enjoying it. I slowly started to have fun with my art again, and I started to put a little more heart into my digital work. Sometime in the middle of that sketchbook, 2022 was ending, and I was able to save up enough money from work to buy a drawing tablet with a screen that I could draw directly on. I think it became a little easier just to doodle on it because I was able to put a pen directly to a screen and see what I was drawing, like I could with my sketchbooks. I started posting a few of those doodles as a way to sort of rip the band-aid off of my perfectionism. Not everything I made had to be completely perfect or incredible, and it was getting a lot easier to draw because of that. My digital art output that year was actually, cracked. I think that's some of the most art I've ever made within a year's time, and I improved really quickly as a result. I even started making a couple of tiny animations in animatics again. By now you're probably wondering, Colleen, what the hell does this have to do with your short film? Well, a little into 2023, I made a silly little Valentine's Day post with a drawing of Dover and Calypso. And something crazy happened. I had fun drawing them. So I started drawing them in my sketchbooks along with my other characters. And I drew them again. And again. And again. And then I redesigned them a little bit, and I made Calypso's tail look more like the flower petal design you're seeing now. And then I kept drawing them. I'm sure most of you know by now that I have a lot of my own characters that I really like drawing, but at this point, whenever I draw these funny little sweethearts who love each other so much, I feel such a sense of ease and happiness. I cannot stress enough how huge of a deal it is to feel comfort drawing these two again. This film went from something that almost made me give up on my dreams completely to being one of the things I'm most excited to make right now. I've got no more deadlines or rubrics or grades to worry about. I get to make it the way I want on my own terms. I can put so much more energy into making this thing that I genuinely love so much. It's probably far from a groundbreaking story, but I honestly don't think it needs to be groundbreaking at this point. As long as I can enjoy creating it and telling it, and if it touches at least a few people in a positive way, that's probably the best outcome I can hope for. I don't have a set release date for this film just yet because I want to take my time with it, and I'm planning on submitting it to film festivals once I'm done, so it might be a little bit before everyone can see it, but once that's all wrapped up, it'll be uploaded here on my YouTube channel for you all to watch. I'm also definitely going to be making more art with these two, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Thank you guys so much for watching and for humoring me while I talk about my funny little story. It's getting really hot in this closet, I have to get out of here. I really hope you all like this short even half as much as I'm enjoying making it. I genuinely can't wait to share it with you all. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and be sure to show some love to all the other cool indie projects you come across today. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye-bye!